Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Unrestricted Live. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm so excited for today's guest. So just really quickly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Athena Simpson. I am currently in Panama City, Panama, and I am a business and marketing strategist and productivity coach. And I started Unrestricted because I believed and I realized that this idea of success that society gives us is broken. We're feeling super overwhelmed, not good enough. We're working super hard and chasing this societal idea of success. But actually, when we sit with it and we think about it, it's not necessarily an idea of success that we've created on our own. And I was definitely there myself. I was chasing a successful career. I kept going for more and more things and setting up businesses, and it wasn't fulfilling me. It wasn't making me happy to the point that I burn out. So I decided that this idea of success was someone else's, and I needed to redefine what that looks like for me. And I set out to replace toxic habits and toxic ways of thinking with positive ones. And I ended up freeing myself, my mind, my body. I sold everything I owned when I was living in London. I packed everything down into 2 suitcases, left the business I was a partner in, and literally ran away to join the circus and go on a journey of self-discovery. And I performed, I traveled the world, and I learned, that living unrestricted is truly a way to feel fulfilled and happy. And throughout my life, I've been very, very lucky to meet so many amazing women that don't buy into the idea of success, and they live their lives differently. And so Unrestricted is about introducing you to these amazing people and having conversations with them about how they define success, these amazing habits and hobbies that they get into, how they balance their life, and just hearing really inspirational things. So I want to introduce you to my next guest, who is amazing. She's someone that I've loved and been fortunate enough to have in my life since 2014. Her name is Shakira Payne, and I'm going to bring her on now. So please welcome Shakira. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm
Thank you
really
for
good.
having
How are
me.
you?
I'm really
Thank
good.
you for joining me.
I'm really,
I'm
really
so
good.
excited. Amazing. So welcome to the show. I'm 7 for 7 in taking people's podcast virginity, which is amazing considering the, career that you have in communications. So thank you for trusting me with that. And I'd love if you could just start us off by introducing yourself to us and tell us a bit about you and this amazing career that you have.
Yeah, so I'm Shakira Payne. I currently manage the PR for Sonos in the UK. I've worked in communications for the last 17 years, which spans many different sectors within that. So I've worked across, I'm currently working in tech, music, culture. I've previously worked in agencies, in-house. I set up my own company before. I even made headdresses as well, because I'm a bit of a hustler. So I'm always creative and trying my hand at different things. But ultimately, communication has been the route that I've followed and that I'm currently in. So yeah, I'm a bit of an all-rounder when it comes to communication. So like I mentioned, tech, TV, fashion, culture, art, and events. So that's my background.
Amazing. And just really quickly, explain to us what Sonos is for anybody that might not know what it is.
Yes, so Sonos makes basically wireless audio speakers. So it's a new technology that most people are probably using in some capacity. They specifically connect music through Wi-Fi.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really cool brand doing really, really cool stuff. So where are you living right now?
At the moment, I'm living in Southeast London. I am a Londoner. I grew up in West London, but London is my home.
Amazing. You're one of the rarities in London of people actually born and raised
Yes.
Londoner.
Very, very true.
So tell us about a project the project that you're working on right now, and kind of what the next 3 to 6 months look like for you.
Well, I mean, I'm in terms of my role at Sonos, there's a lot that's been going on. Just even in the last 4 months, we've launched a number of things, one being Sonos Radio, which is a new service platform that's available to our customers. For those that are Sonos owners, go and check out. We've also launched a new home theatre speaker, which is amazing. It's got Dolby Atmos on it. We've launched a bunch of other things. So that's kind of Sonos side. And then on a personal side, I'm kind of helping my husband, who's basically, he runs a production company, but he's also kind of on this journey with this community project, which I'm kind of supporting with. So it's local to our area, but it's really exciting. It's really about setting up a creative community space, which is an opportunity to learn, grow things, learn and share skills, and also just really come together in shared experiences.
Amazing. Oh, that sounds so cool. It kind of reminds me a little bit about the stuff that we used to do when we first met. So Shakira and I have actually known each other since 2014, I think, when we were both working at Liberty, which is a youth marketing agency in London. And there was a project called Somewhere To that had a £7 million grant from the lottery fund to provide free space to young people. So that was a really fun project and really great that we got to work with each other on that. And Shakira, actually, we were just talking about this a minute ago, but you know, my first ever live TV appearance was thanks to this woman. She kind of blindsided me when I walked into the office one morning. It was like, "You're going on London Live." I was like, "Oh my God," but it was amazing. So,
and you did great.
Thank you. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. But yeah, I really appreciate you pushing me out of my comfort zone and getting me on that. So I think you're super fascinating, and we've been kind of tracking it kind of at a similar trajectory over the years of just, looking after our well-being and kind of finding this balance and with our careers and how we look after ourselves. So I love kind of hearing about how people spend their days, particularly when they have, more of a regimented schedule with corporate jobs. So tell us, break down a day in the life. Like how much do you work? Do you move? Do you do fun stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I've actually been at Sonos for the last 5 years, and it's the longest time that I've ever been at any company in my whole career, because I've always kind of loved the kind of excitement of moving around and learning new things. But actually Sonos is a company that is quite unique in my time working in communications and working in a company. So no day is exactly the same at Sonos. So I actually have been practicing flexible working at Sonos. So I've been working from home really for the last 5 years, and I would go into the office a couple of days a week and meet with my team there. But since the lockdown, I've literally been at home full time. So my day really will start between 6 and 7 a.m. I'll get up, I'll walk the dog first thing in the morning. I'll either do that or do some yoga. I'll come back, I make myself a smoothie, start my day right, and then my meetings will pretty much my day's pretty much organized around my Zoom meetings. So they'll pretty much start from 9 a.m. sometimes in the morning, and then I'll have them in the evening. So generally I'll probably work up until midday, and then I'll take a couple of hours out. I'll definitely take the dog out, get some fresh air, do some walking, maybe do a bit more yoga, maybe listen to an audiobook, listen to some music, just kind of connect with nature. It's really good for me mentally. And then I'll probably come back and get back on some more calls between 3 and 4. And then my day pretty much ends around 6, 7, because I work for a global company. You kind of have to accommodate for meetings that might go into the late afternoon, early evening. But generally, I work between the hours of 9 and 6, and if depending on what we've got going on, again that might vary. It's like ebbs and flows. So like when it's really busy when we're launching stuff, my day can be really, really intense, with not much time even for lunch. But that's just because you're processing a lot of information, you're briefing people, you're talking to media, all that kind of stuff. But then it's the rhythm always changes, so it's never a constant. So where it can be intense periods, it can slow down, you have a bit of a breather, you can acknowledge what you've done, you can connect with your team, and acknowledge that, you know, you guys are rocking it, and then it starts again. So it's quite a nice rhythm, I have to say. So right now I love work, I love my life, because the rhythms suit me. I work well when I can work intensely, but I also need space for myself and time to kind of integrate back into normality.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to ask you to move yourself just a little bit, because we're getting half of your lovely face. Thank you. Perfect. So I realized, just really quick, can you explain, I mean, we've been working in this forever, but for anybody that might not understand the difference between like communications and marketing, like tell us a little bit about communications really quick, and then I want to dive a little bit more into you.
Yeah, so communications obviously is quite a broad term, but the team so my role is mainly press relations. So a lot of my work is directly speaking to media and journalists. So my role is representing the brand. You know, we work on the messaging, we promote the products. So we work across the cultural side of things, the corporate side of our communication, as well as the consumer deliverables in terms of events and things that you read about in the magazines and the newspapers, on the TV. That's my role. So I specifically work and communicate with media on behalf of the company reputation.
Amazing. So I heard it explained once, and I think it's such a really simple way of like grasping the difference between like communications and marketing. Like marketing is paying people to talk about you, and communications is getting people to talk about you. So like any sort of activity where you're getting them to talk about you without spending money directly for like advertising, you know?
That's right. So the term that we would use is earned media. So a lot of my role is about relationships with that media. So it's really about giving context to the brand, the messages that we want to deliver, and giving context to the journalists and the media platforms that we want writing about us, and even the ones that we don't want writing about us.
Yeah. A little bit of like managing the comms that might come out, and,
exactly,
you know, crises, managing that and how you respond to that. So
exactly,
it's, you know, kind of how you talk about the brand. And I think a lot of people that don't necessarily like work in this world don't realize that a brand is not just your logo. It's, you know, the image, it's how people perceive you. It's all the things that you say about it. It's people's perception of your company in your mind. So yeah, just thought, throw that in really quick, just so people are clear there. So, what are some of your like non-negotiables each day or week to make sure that you're maintaining like your happiness and your balance?
The non-negotiables for me, it's just like making sure that I sleep and eat well, and exercise. You know, like I need, and also just time for myself. A lot of my job is very much about speaking to people, working in teams, giving out lots of energy, and so for me to maintain a high level of communication and contact with people, I really need to make sure that I'm investing in myself. And that means, like, you know, taking time out where, you know, I block out time where I'm not got meetings or I'm not speaking to people, and actually I'm just focused on, you know, making sure I'm eating right, spending time, whether it's doing exercise or even doing meditation or just listening to music.
Yeah, it's so, you know, to be extroverted all the time, even if you are an extrovert, even if you're cool with like socializing, it's so important to take that time for yourself and recharge. And you touched on a point that I like get really ranty and angry about, which is sleep, you know, and like we've somehow in society, like people are like having this marker of like lack of sleep is like being successful, you know, like going to bed after midnight and waking up at 4. And it's like, it's actually crazy because, you know, there's so much science to show like how important sleep is to your well-being, to your mindset, to your productivity, and trying to like reduce the amount that you're sleeping to get more done is actually like the complete opposite of what you should be doing. So I'm so glad you mentioned sleep.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and everybody runs on a different rhythm, right? Like my husband, he probably on average manages to function on 4 to 5 hours sleep a day. That I can't. I need 8 to kind of really give my best to people, and to myself, really, because I'm just in a better mood when I've had a decent amount, a good night's sleep, basically.
Yeah, I can't remember where this stat came from, but somebody said like sleeping less than 7 hours a night, 3 nights in a row is the equivalent
Yeah.
of basically like driving drunk in the rain, you know? So you're just like,
Yeah.
and all the moodiness that comes with like a hangover and like the
Yeah.
irritability and your ability to focus, all of that is really wrapped up in sleep.
Well, yeah, it becomes an
Um,
endurance test, right? Then your days start to unravel, and your kind of your day should be filled with kind of like happiness rather than kind of anxiety and fear of kind of dealing with everything. Whereas, like for me, yeah, sleep is really important, and then yeah, having time to myself allows me to kind of give what I need to give when it's necessary.
Yeah, and
Mm.
it's, having the knowledge that like time to yourself and like that
Mm.
setting that boundary
Mhm,
is actually
mhm,
going to make
mhm.
you like be more present and be better with the people that you work with or the people in your life.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people get worried like, oh, if, I'll look selfish if I try to take
Mm.
time for myself.
Absolutely, and you brought up that the term boundaries is really good because it allows you to set boundaries for yourself and for how that your working practices really. Because for me, boundaries, especially when I'm on the phone all day, or I'm on the computer, I'm in meetings, I'm constantly giving out, I'm talking, and sometimes actually just being quiet is really important. So especially if I go away do like media trips and you're like 24/7, you're basically for 7 days, like with your teams, you're with journalists, you're just switched on the whole time. And actually, the only time that I get to myself is when I'm go to my hotel room to go to bed, which actually can be quite
Hmm.
intense. So for that time, it's like in the morning, I'll get up in the mornings and just like kind of might do 20 minutes meditation, might do some stretching, and then then your day starts when you go for breakfast in the morning. So it's just
Yeah.
finding boundaries that and even in my days, just making sure that I block out meeting time, like between meetings, just making sure I block out times that allow me to just focus on if I'm planning something or if I need to think about a strategy or whatever. It's like allowing myself the time to just commit an hour or two where I'm not available for meetings or giving something to someone else.
It's, another thing that I just, you're
Mm-hmm.
touching on all these things
Mm,
and reminding me of these like
mm,
triggers that I had from corporate life and things that I
mm-hmm,
needed to learn. So,
mm-hmm,
like boundaries and communication about your boundaries. And
mm-hmm.
a lot of people get nervous about like blocking out strategy time or like blocking out
Mm,
time that they're not available, and to work on things. And
mm-hmm,
actually, as long as you tell people beforehand or you make it really clear, like in
mm-hmm,
your calendar that
mm-hmm,
other people can see, like, oh, she's
mm-hmm,
working right now. That's why she's not responding. But
mm-hmm.
it's so important, especially now when working from home. The only way that people can get in touch with us is
Yes.
by sending us messages.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you get interrupted, it takes 23 minutes to get your brain
Mm,
back into whatever it is you were doing.
yeah.
So actually just being constantly available to your colleagues or your boss is
Mm,
going to make you
mm-hmm,
like less productive. It's going to make you, angry. So,
mm-hmm,
it's okay to set a boundary and be like, hey, I have this
mm,
piece of work. I'm going to put 2 hours in my diary tomorrow morning. I'm
mm-hmm,
not going
mm-hmm,
to be available, but I'll be online afterwards.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you do that. And
Yes.
has anyone ever had an issue with that?
No, not at all. And in fact, it's encouraged in our workspace in terms of like currently, obviously with the lockdown, the dynamic of people's working practices have completely changed. So they've introduced a new thing called care time. Which
Mm,
is yes, there's kind of obviously you block out your time, but additionally there's this care time for obviously people that have kids at home or if they need to do shopping for family members that are incapacitated. So it's really taking into context actually everybody's working, but everyone also has a life. And actually, how do you set those boundaries that you're allowing to still be
mm,
productive in your day-to-day work while also being productive in your life? So that's that. The setup at Sonos allows a lot more flexibility for you to be more transparent about kind of your days and what you're doing. And in fact, like a lot of the time, you're encouraged to say if you are feeling overloaded or you are under pressure or you need support, be vocal about it. So that's kind of been um, a positive in terms of feeling that you can take ownership and being transparent and saying, look, I'm really busy right now. This is what I've got going on. but it allows you to kind of open up more better communication lines with team members that are, you know, quite often I work cross-functionally. And so because I'm communication, people just come to me all the time going, hey, we've got this thing, can you PR it? And I'm like, well, in theory, yes, but I need to understand X, Y, Z, and then put that into context. It's like, well, this is a priority for me. And actually, how does this align with the strategy in terms of what we're meant to be doing? And when I give them context, they're like, oh, okay, I understand. So again, it's like, you have to take the time to be willing to kind of communicate with that. But boundaries and setting time aside is really important because, like you say, it just helps other people to better communicate with you and understand your working practices, because everybody does have a different working practice.
Yeah, 100%. And also, you know, when you learn how to communicate with where you're at and kind of like negotiate that. So like people will always come to you something and it's like they're a really high priority, but not yours. And you can kind of like, well, when do you actually need this and how important is this? Because, you know, there's a tendency, especially with people early in their careers, to just say yes to everything. Yeah. And then they're not doing anything well, and that doesn't help anyone, you know? So like the earlier you can start learning to communicate to people in your life when they ask you for something and just be like, well, when do you actually need this? And how about this? And would this be okay? And it's like a couple minutes of like, instead of just being like, yes, and then being resentful that you've just added another thing to your plate, you know? So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Really important for like mindset in workplaces. So, it sounds like Sonos is an incredible place to work, really supportive and really kind of, you know, cognizant of like what's going on right now with you guys. So how important is it for you to be aligned with the place that you work?
100% need to be aligned. Like that is my number one. And having, you know, over the years worked in other environments that actually have been quite toxic, and passively so, where it's nothing immediate, it's nothing obvious, but it's a slow grind. You know, for me, the culture of a company, the people that work there play into you know, how you align with a company, you know, your outlook on things, how their expectations of the people in the workplace. Do they want cookie cut robots of a version of themselves, or do they actually want diversity? Because a place that truly allows diversity to thrive and flourish is actually a great place to be in, and actually live by those values. And then, you know, I've been in environments where they say the right things, but actually they just want you know, a carbon copy of themselves, to regurgitate a version of them, which is not productive or constructive to your own self-development. So yeah, I would say that, you know, those what seem like soft, passive things actually are super important. So for me, you know, whenever I've gone to a company and I've seen a high turnover of staff, it's alarm bells. I'm like, why why are there so many people coming through? And yeah, you know, of course, in an agency, that's just the nature of things. But generally, you know, if it's bringing up alarm bells, there's a reason. And then also the people, because ultimately the people are the ones that make the experience. They're the ones you learn from, you grow from. And also, I've made some really great friends, you know, through the workspace. So all those things are really, for me, a positive combination of why I'd want to work somewhere and ultimately why I'd want to stay there. So if I don't feel aligned in an environment, and trust me, I've worked at places where I'm like, I do not fit in here and I'm never going to fit in here. I don't actually want to be here. Why am I here? So then it's just making a conscious decision. It's like, well, I don't need to be here. So find somewhere where you do want to be, and work it out. So yeah, it takes time. I think, you know, if you're starting out in your career and all you want to do is just kind of earn those stripes, then it's probably harder. But ultimately, if you have a guiding compass within you in terms of like, what do you want from this experience? You know, because a lot of my great experiences have been from the people I've worked with. That's who I've learned from. It's not the company itself, you know, it's the people within the company. So, and I've been lucky enough to work and meet some amazing, amazing people. So I think, yeah, it should be number one priority.
Yeah. So, you know, there's there's this kind of leftover culture, I think, from our parents' generation
Mm-hmm.
where you went to a place and you stayed
Mm-hmm.
there for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
and that set you up for life because you had
Mm-hmm.
like a retirement fund, and
Mm.
you didn't switch around. So we're kind of going through this like shuffle of like, now it's like gone to the other spectrum where people are leaving just constantly,
Mm.
but there's still that leftover, like, is this me? Am I not doing a good job? So like our bodies are like incredibly intuitive systems. And
Mm.
if you're dreading going into work, if you're
Mm-hmm.
having physical reactions about like the work that you're doing, or feeling uncomfortable or
Mm.
unsettled, or like you're not fitting in, like tune into that and
Yeah.
listen to that, because not every workplace is going to be like that. And just
Mm.
sticking it through and trying to make it better, if it's not reciprocal, like get out.
Yeah.
Life is way
100%.
too short to be staying in places that make you miserable. And I've made this mistake multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best moments, I think, when I realized like this isn't worth it, is my dad.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of sage advice from my dad, but I was talking to him about a workplace I was at, and they were just making some decisions that I just fundamentally like was not aligned with. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, well, the best thing I ever learned in my career was not to overstay my welcome. And I was like, that's it, like
Mm.
this, I'm not welcome here anymore. Like it doesn't fit. And there's no reason for me to like try to like bash down the door or
Yeah.
change how they're doing
Yeah.
things. What I can change is the environment that I put myself in. So I think a lot of people struggle with that decision of like,
Mm.
should I leave or should I just like wait it out and see if it gets better? But if
Mm.
it's feeling bad from day
Mm.
one, like
Mm.
very rarely have I seen that turn around.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stems from the fear of like, oh shit, how am I going to pay my rent? Like, what does this mean? You're stepping into the unknown, but actually,
Mm,
it's an old saying, but where one door closes, opportunity presents itself in many other ways. And actually, sometimes stepping into ambiguity or the unknown, so many things come out of it. I've been in situations where you're like, fuck, like, what am I going to do now? Like, I wasn't ready to leave, but now I'm forced to. And actually, sometimes forcing you into uncomfortable situations, those challenges bring out other skill sets in you, or factors within your personality that you didn't even know existed. And actually, that allows you to
mhm.
take ownership of it and going, fuck it, I can do this. Actually, I'm more than capable. And also, I believe that if you have intention, those things you will be fine. It's like I've been told on the same day, you don't have a job anymore, and I'm like, fuck, what does this mean? Like, and then you just kind of go, right, well, just get on. I'm going to find another job. I'm going to hit up contacts, and you hustle and you get on with things. And it's just like, rather than sitting around waiting and sitting in fear, it's like, actually, I think sometimes challenges in life push you into spaces which expand you, actually.
And we've got conditioned to feeling comfortable,
Mm.
like we're always striving to remain
Mm.
comfortable and not be in an uncomfortable situation, and not be in like a risky
Mhm.
situation, or pushing our bodies, our minds, our
Mhm.
emotions. Like we have created these environments, it's like it's just constantly comfort.
Mm.
But actually, like you said, if you're not pushing yourself a little bit, or like stepping into the unknown,
Mhm.
then there's all these things that you might not be able to experience, or opportunities that might not come your way as a result of that.
Mhm.
So it's you've over the last couple years, or a while now, have been doing lots of self-development and incorporating new practices into your life. So tell us a bit more about like some of the things that you've discovered and these new things that you've learned, and how that's kind of helped you get to this mindset, because you weren't always there. So maybe tell us a little bit about when you didn't feel comfortable, and.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, actually, because I would say at 25, which was in 2005, God, long time ago, I was at a turning point in my life, career, and I had to make some decisions that really were going to be quite disruptive to the status quo in terms of what I'd built, in terms of my friendship groups, my job, all that kind of stuff. And I had to make a decision that was basically going to smash it apart. And that is when my spiritual journey began, actually, because I went traveling to Brazil and spent a lot of time out there, and was introduced to books that really opened up my mind and gave me an understanding of like the choices you make in life. You're presented with choices all the time. And from that moment on, I kind of, my innate understanding or intuition started to awaken, and I started to tune in more into the choices that I was making, where I wanted to be, what I didn't want to do, what I did want to do. And yeah, I would say that it's kind of, throughout the years, I've kind of explored, you know, my background is diverse. That's because I've always got bored very quickly, and I've always been like, I want to try this and I want to try that, and I've taken the good parts from it and then moved on and taken that with me. So I've benefited from that, but at the same time, I've still been in, like you say, in the conditioning of like, you want to present yourself in the right way, you want to get that promotion, you want to get that paycheck, and all those things. And then I would say probably in the last, actually 5 years, probably, it coincided with me coming to Sonos, actually. I was at Liberty and went traveling. And at that point, I was at my life where I was just like, do you know what? Fuck this. Like, I want to be happy in my life. I'm living for me. I'm not living to make other people happy. If I'm in this job because I know my value and what I'm bringing to the table, then that's all that matters. I'm not going to keep chasing, trying to please other people. Either you understand me and the value that I'm bringing to the table, which is why you've employed me, or you don't. And so I've kind of took that attitude where it's just like, I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to try and present a version of what I think you want me to be. And actually, it just took away a load of bullshit. And actually, the attitude was just very much like, you know, I can't, it was almost like a bit of a manifestation in terms of like, this is what I don't want, but I want to focus on what I do want. What kind of job do I want to stay in communications? You know, I've always constantly questioned what am I doing and why am I doing it? And am I enjoying it? And if I'm enjoying it, and to be honest, I've always enjoyed working in PR. There's been times when I've hated it and questioned why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I've been working on projects that haven't inspired me. I've been working with people that, you know, are oppressive or whatever, you know, it's navigating that and understanding those issues aren't my issue. Actually, I do enjoy working in PR. I do enjoy working with you know, interesting people that expand my mind. I love working on projects that, you know, bring joy, happiness, and some kind of entertainment in a positive way. So yeah, I feel like that mindset kind of has brought me to where I am now, and I've just maintained the fact that actually, you know, am I doing this because I want the experience and I want a positive experience, or am I doing this because I think I should do this job, you know, and differentiating, you know, the fact that if I'm just doing this job to earn money, I can do anything, you know. I'd rather work in a bar or a cafe and not have to deal with the bullshit, you know, or the hassle. So it's just kind of, you know, what life experience do I want, you know, because I've got one shot at this, and actually it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard. So I can make a choice. So I feel it's like, you know, sense checking myself and going, why am I doing this? And if I'm doing this because I want to and I want the experience, then cool. And, you know, don't get me wrong, it's like there is some experiences that have been super challenging, but I've wanted that. And that's okay, because I'm complicit in that choice, as opposed to feeling like I'm stuck in a choice that I didn't want, you know?
Yeah, it's like an active versus a passive, you know, like feeling like, oh, this is being done to me, versus like I'm actively choosing to put myself in this situation right now. And I just remembered a quote you told me. I can't even remember like however many years. And it's like, you know, those things that friends say to you and they just like stick with you and you never forget it. And I refer back to it so many times, but you told me, and I'm probably going to like butcher the actual language around it, but the sentiment is that you do, like, the things that you do are actually what you want to be doing, you know? So you're consciously like maybe unconsciously choosing the things that you're doing, but like, do you remember the exact quote? But it was like this guy that you heard that said that, and it's like, we do the things that we actually want to be doing, you know? We end up spending our time in the places and doing the things that we want to do.
Yeah, I can't remember verbatim, but I'm
Yeah.
always throwing out random stuff all the time. But
No, you
I
like I
do
know,
believe
like,
that. Yeah.
but it was so interesting to me because I was like, my God, like I keep saying I don't want these things. Yeah, I keep
Mm.
end up like spending my time doing certain things. So I think the mindset, first of all, that was like, okay, I do have a choice, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
maybe unconsciously I was putting myself in these very crazy, like stressful work
Mm.
situations,
Mhm.
but I was
Mhm.
choosing that on one level or another. It
Mm.
was like what I
Mm.
wanted to be doing.
Mm.
And it was when I started unpacking, like, hang on a minute, like, do I feel like I need to do this or do I actually want to do this?
Mm.
And what do I enjoy spending my time doing and what's going to fill me up? But
Mhm.
on some level, part of me was like seeking out that toxicity for whatever
Mm. Mm.
reason. So it was just a really empowering comment that you made that's like
Mm.
really kind of served me well over this journey of like, designing the life that I actually want to live
Yes.
versus going after this life that I thought I wanted.
Mm.
And yeah. So
Yeah,
like the word, oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think that goes to like what we were talking about earlier when it's the same thing but alignment. So quite often, yes, there's the alignment in the work, but there's the alignment in the things that you want and the things you think you want. And like we talk about conditioning, and so when you kind of go through the whole system of school and education, and you enter into the workspace, you're told that you should aspire to those things. You're told that to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
you need to do this and da da da, and you have to work really hard. That language that needs to change. Absolutely, you have to strive and work for what you want to achieve because no one's going to hand that to you. But the kind of the focus on hard actually doesn't really align with me. And quite often I think exactly what you're saying. It's like, am I actually aligned with the things that I want and the things that I'm currently striving for? And actually there's
Mm-hmm.
misalignment because quite often, even with my husband, he's been running his own company for the last 10 years, and I'm like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, well, I don't want to run a company, I just want to like hang out on a beach and get stoned. And I'm like, well, if that's what you want to do it. Why are you striving for this then if you don't want that? But then he's like, no, actually I do want to do this. And it's like, well, cool, but you need to be true to yourself, right? And actually listening to your inner voice and what you do internally, what you do externally, quite often they're not actually aligned.
I think a lot of that comes down to like we were never taught any skills
Mm-hmm.
or practices or the mindfulness, the yoga,
Mm.
the designing your life in your mind, like these
Mm-hmm.
things that we kind of discover on our own or these books that we research, but it's not like we're taught that in
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
any sort of skill or at work. It's like, well, what do you want, what are your career goals? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, okay, but like, and then you set your objectives, but it's usually to serve the company, and
Mm.
maybe there's a little like self-development thrown in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really on us
Mm-hmm.
to you know have that conversation with ourselves, and
Mm.
what genuinely would make me happy, what does
Mm-hmm.
that look like, and what do I want to do to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So you know we don't take the time for ourselves to do that. And up until this pandemic kicked off, I think
Mm.
so many of us were like stuck in this like busy commuting,
Mm.
da 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 da. So we didn't have the time necessarily, and now we've got loads of time, and we're
Mm.
sitting with ourselves, and it's like, okay, what are we going to do with that time, and how are we going to think about this situation now,
Mm.
and what do we I think a lot of people are rethinking, like, hey, I can work from home.
Yeah.
Like all these companies that said you couldn't
Mm.
are
Mm-hmm.
now, they don't have a choice. And,
Mm-hmm.
so people are like, I could be a digital nomad. I could literally go anywhere. So I think lots of people are starting to have that conversation
Mm.
with
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's really exciting. And, one of the things I love about you is like every time I talk to you, I'm just like notebook writing down all these suggestions, because you are, the definition of a student of life, and like, your thirst for knowledge is incredible, and you just absorb so much. Maybe, that's part of what lends so well to you doing a dynamic job at communications. But tell us a few suggestions for like books or resources if people are just starting to explore this. Think back when you started on this journey of self-discovery.
Mm. Yeah. Oh God, there's so many. But I would say for anyone that is just starting on a spiritual awakening, or trying to figure out what it means and defining it, Celestine Prophecy was like my number one go-to. That was the book that opened up my mind to a narrative and a language that resonated and that was relatable to my own experiences in life. So it very much comes from a narrative of like, there's almost like a fictional story. I think it's a fictional story. So it's told in that way, but this guy is on this journey where he comes into contact with these experiences, which, like, you know, we all have, whether that's you know, coincidences, and explaining what coincidences mean, and the randomness of when you think of someone and then they pop up and they message you, or you get a letter from them, and actually, you know, we're all interconnected, and we're all energy, and we all have a message in one way or another, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And so that really opened up my understanding of what energy means and what spirituality means, and seeing signs, tuning into these subtleties of the universe. So the Celestine Prophecy is kind of really basic, rudimentary, kind of if you're just stepping into trying to dip your toe in and get an understanding of it. Eckhart Tolle is another guru that anybody that is into spirituality or on their journey will be aware of. The Power of Now. It's an audiobook actually that I bought the book, and the book I didn't get into the book. However, with the audio, it just, he still is, like, whenever I'm feeling anxious or like I feel like I've got blockages going on, I'll just tune into him. And whatever point I last left it, it's almost like the universe is like, now you are ready to hear Eckhart speak this chapter. And even though I've listened to it so many times, there's points in your day or your life where you actually hear what he's saying, and then apply that into my own every day. So he's someone that, if you listen to him, he's got this very soporific voice that is slow and makes you think. It allows you to be very present when you're listening to him, which is a very different experience to reading. So that's a good one. I would recommend the audio. There's also another book, which is called The Vortex, The Laws of Attraction by Esther Hicks, which it's really interesting because it's more about your relationships in life, your relationships with your parents, friends, relationship with yourself. And it just gives you this, it's not for everyone, because it's Esther Hicks channels like this higher spiritual entity that communicates to her and kind of gives her, I guess, the guidelines to living your life, living your truest self, being present in that. But it allows you to unpick and unravel your, I guess, the role that you play in the life that you create. And a lot of the time we're not conscious that we're creating the world that we exist in, but we are, and actually being much more aware of the things we say, how we react and respond to things, which, you know, obviously ties into what Eckhart Tolle says as well. And then another interesting book, which is on the flip side, it's called Stealing Fire, which I recommend to anyone that is in the corporate world. It's by a guy called Stephen Kotler, but it gives you a new interesting perspective on kind of how Silicon Valley and you know, the big wigs in tech are using hallucinogenics to tap into, I guess, a higher understanding of their creativity, which is interesting. So you know, obviously, there's different ways to reach a state of estasis, whether that's through hallucinogenics or whether through sport or any of those kind of activities that take you to the edge of your understanding of, you know, your own mortality, if you will.
even breath work is like the new thing where you can like actually simulate, like, you know, the same things that hallucinogenics might create just by breathing differently. So Giamira, who's tuning in from Germany, just said the Celestine Prophecy was my mindfulness awakening tool. Yes. So or two, not tool, but so you, all four of those that you mentioned, and like I need, now my reading list is filled for the entire month, so I need to get on that. There's a book that I have here, which is really dusty, and I need to
Ah.
read it. But like Michael Pollan wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma, which was all about the food system and stuff, and I loved him. So he wrote this one recently, and it's supposed to be like absolutely amazing. So this is another one that it's got a little dust, but I will dust it off and read that, because there's this whole interesting, you know, world out there with psychedelics, but also using plants. Actually, the woman who's going to be on the podcast next week is a plant medicine facilitator.
Nice. Wow.
So yeah, she's incredible. Her name's Holly. So I'll tell you guys a little bit more about her later. But like, there's not many women that do these journeys either, or guide these journeys. So it's just so cool. This whole new world is like opening up to us. And I think, you know, spirituality used to be like, oh, that's like the weird hippies that are like, you know, running around barefoot and stuff, although I've barely worn shoes in the last 5 months. But, you know, it's something for everybody, and it doesn't have to be like, you know, crazy, you know, I don't know.
Hi, you here?
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry. It's the joy of Panama and Latin America. Sometimes the Wi-Fi might be starting to rain. So usually it's rainy season right now. For whatever reason, the electrical storms from the rain tend to cause the Wi-Fi to go down a little bit. Yes. And also there's we think there might be a protest off in the distance too. So we got the windows closed, but like there was people chanting and playing music and stuff. In Panama, we've had like a super hardcore lockdown. Like nobody's allowed out of the house on a Sunday. So there's something going on. So it's interesting. But anyways, you are someone, like, as long as I've known you, like you've always shown up as yourself, and you've got like such an amazing, unique style and incredible energy about you. And I just, like, when I think of you, I always think of like light and laughter, you know, but like you're so like badass as well. Like, you know, you don't take shit. And I love that about you. But, you know, you didn't always do this. So I'm just wondering, like, what changed? You talked a little bit about it, but like, how would you advise others to get comfortable being themselves, you know, in different situations that they find themselves in? Because some people feel like, oh, at work, I need to be the specific person, and then I can be myself outside of work. But like, you know, from watching you and your balance, it's like you just need to be able to show up as yourself in every situation. So how do you do that, and how would you recommend others do that?
Yeah, I would say I am in a unique position in the sense, like, in communications, and especially the kind of communications that I'm in. I'm working for a kind of innovative tech company. I work across culture and music. Those things kind of easily play into each other. If I was working at a financial bank, it'd probably be harder, because I would have to fit into the constraints of what they expect from their workers. Whereas, again, I think going back to what we were talking about in talking about, like, why do I want to be here? Am I here because this really interests me and I love it. And I think, you know, I'm lucky that I can be free. I can be honest with who I am. I can be open about the way I think, and, you know, the life choices that I make. You know, my colleagues love chatting to me about my weird experiences, that they're like, tell me more. I'm interested, because I just feel like I need to be honest. Like, this is who I am. I've got nothing to hide. I'm not ashamed of anything. But I feel like if you're in an environment that you feel comfortable in, you know, when we talked about, like, how important is it to be aligned with your workspace? That first and foremost comes into play. If you feel aligned with it, then you feel like you can bring your truest self. Obviously, you know, majority of my work colleagues know me as I am, and then there's my friends where they've seen me in all sorts of states where there is no judgment. And I think there has to be again, boundaries, right? There has to be a healthy boundary of like being professional and still being true to who I am and having fun with that and not apologizing for it. But at the same time, you have to tone it down in certain scenarios and who you're speaking to. And it's learning those skill sets, right? It's not just going, fuck you, this is me. It's like, that's too much sometimes. But at the same time, it's bringing in the subtleties of who you are and presenting it in a way that isn't combative. It's like, it doesn't have to be, you are who you are, you dress how you dress, and owning it. To be honest, I go into work and sometimes I get, from the older guys like, ooh, wearing bright pink, and I'm like, it's just a color. It's just a color, and so it's just being really having fun with it and not taking it too seriously, and yeah, it's a hard one because everyone's working experiences or working environment, is different, and how open they are to diversity and different types of characters, and whether you have to wear a uniform or not wear a uniform. It's like all these factors do come into play, but then it's like, well, do you want to be somewhere where you can be free and be yourself, or are you subscribed to working in an environment where actually you do have to wear a uniform and you have to play by the rules and there isn't much flexibility to kind of exist outside of that? Actually, if you have to make that compromise, then that's a life choice, right? And if you're happy being those two versions of yourself, fine. But I think you come to a point where you're actually, I just want to live my true self all the time. And actually you can find environments to do that, especially, like you're saying today with the lockdown, people are adapting to new ways of working, and actually, we're all adults and, we're all responsible, and actually giving people the ownership is empowering. And actually you get so much more out of people when they are allowed to be who they are.
100%, and like in the environments where I felt like I could be myself and I was encouraged to do that, I would work so much harder and I would feel so much more creative and like bought into what I was doing. Where you feel like you're restricted, you're almost going to restrict, you're going to second guess everything. And I can't remember if it was the last podcast, but I realized it's such a bad experience. Like the first work experience I had in London, it was like this total passive aggressive work environment, and I just bounded in there like California roadie, like and it didn't go down well at all, and that put this impression on me where I felt like I needed to be like really cognizant of how I spoke and everything that I did from that point on. And I realized after I left London towards the end of last year, I would talk so slowly. I'd almost like kind of go like I was like, what am I doing with my face? And I was getting these lines because I was like thinking about everything before I said it. But it's just like normal Athena is just like word diarrhea. I just like, there's no filter. It comes straight from here and goes straight out the mouth. And that's how I've always been, but like, I felt like I couldn't do that anymore. So it was this weird, like physical thing that I realized I was like, ouch, it like really hurt to talk because I was doing that all the time. But you mentioned the other day, like you were in work situations where you felt like you needed to change your hair. So like, I'm just curious now, like, would you still do that, or like, cause there's certain things that I don't think you should have to change no matter what environment you're in.
Not at all. I mean, I would say like, in my early career, like when, I was starting out and, I would relax my hair and have it blow dried straight because I was like, I will be taken as more professional, and I don't want to be seen as someone that's a bit of a bubblehead or isn't smart or intelligent. And so I was subscribing to the conditioning of how one should present themselves and how you should be perceived in a professional environment. And then just over the years I was like, fuck that, man. Like I've got an afro and sometimes I want to dye it blonde and this is who I am, and if you don't like it, so fucking what? I'm happy. And if you don't like it, then I don't actually want to be in an environment where that freaks you out. Like I'm never going to grow around someone that is that limited in their understanding of individuals and diversity. So that was an issue for me. But that was when I was younger and, you're kind of starting out and, should I wear a suit? Should I wear my hair straight and, smart? And then I just got to a point where I was like, it's not healthy for me. My hair's like not healthy anymore from the over extension of blow drying and relaxing, and actually I was just like, fuck it, that doesn't make me happy anymore. It makes me happy leaving my hair natural. And so like that was also my journey, and just kind of stepping into, this is who I am. Like, I'm not going to apologize for it. It shouldn't offend you.
That's just crazy to me that you know, your natural hair would somehow make people not take you seriously or think you were a bubblehead, you know? So I think it's a nice segue. Like, there's a lot going on right now, right? We have the pandemic. We also have this like situation that we're dealing with where, like, you know, we're confronted with the fact that there's systemic racism that still exists, and these impressions, and, you know, these backwards kind of thought processes. So I'm just interested, like, how are you handling or taking in or processing all this stuff that's going on right now? What's your feelings about it?
Yeah, like there's a lot of you know, thoughts and processing, but you know, I've been processing a lot since day one. You know, I'm a woman of color, like there's no denying that. And so it's always been I've always been aware and conscious on the peripherals that, like, you know, racism exists, and there's inequalities, but it's never been something that's held me back, personally. I've been lucky enough to have the attitude as if you want something, you have to work for it, and you just present your best self, and be judged on that. However, in the current climate of things, you know, that's kind of come to the boil, it's inevitable, right? You know, the struggle is real. The suppression is strong and alive today, and the systems that serve it are tightly wrapped up. And I think, you know, the protests that are happening and the conversations that are happening need to be happening. They, you know, those that are suppressed, the Black communities that feel like they haven't had a voice, they don't. You know, there's laws that are actually in place, they're in black and white, which has been set up to keep a subset of society suppressed. Like, there's no denying that. If anyone hasn't watched it, watch 13th, and that's specific to what's happening in America. But obviously in the UK, there's systemic oppression as well. So there's young black, you know, young men, black in particular, that are, you know, finding a lot of difficulty in certain, you know, communities that are, you know, low income, education that is stunted in the sense where they don't progress, and therefore they don't get the jobs, they don't get the money. It's all this, it's just this loop, and actually it's a bigger issue within society across the board. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work, and I think right now, at this moment in time, the anger needs to come out. Acknowledgement needs to be accepted, and you know, for communities outside of the Black communities, it's really about just acknowledging, giving the space to let that anger subside. Everyone should be educating themselves, as well as the Black community. Really, it's about educating themselves, you know, educating about their history, understanding how the system that we all exist in actually works. And majority of us that don't work within it are not privy to it, and therefore we subscribe to a narrative. Well, we don't know anything else. We just go, okay, this is how things are. But actually, once we start educating ourselves and connecting with communities that allow us to understand with clarity the situation that we're in, and then we can start working together to really impact change, like real change, not just, you know, protesting is one part of it, and that absolutely has a part to play. But the real protesting starts when people really understand, when they start making governments accountable, and they start breaking down the system in a more constructive way, in terms of, like, understand the legalities of things. You know, most people just don't understand that, and actually, when you're trying to fight a system and you don't understand the background of those things, it's really quite difficult. So yeah, I feel like this is an age where everyone is just starting to educate themselves. Everyone's acknowledging this, and you know, so I think it's an important time. It means that you can have an open conversation. It's not been a conversation. It's even just uttering anything about race, or trying to engage in any discussion. You know, I've had friends that are like, oh, you know, racism doesn't exist in America. And I'm like, what the fuck? What do you mean? Like, where, what? You know, but this is someone that is English, but they work in the US. And so, like, their experiences are very different. But at the same time, they're ignorant to it. And so it's like, first of all, you need to pull the curtains. see what you're dealing with, and then you can kind of start going, right, this is where we actually need to start dismantling a system that actually is suppressing and oppressing a lot of communities.
It's kind of like the stages of grief, isn't it? Like, is the first one denial, and then the next one's like anger, and like everybody's just like really angry and upset right now, and understandably so. But I think you and I were talking about this the other day. Like, at some point, the way that we can start moving forward is being proactive and positive about the opportunities here.
Yeah.
So like, this has all brought it out. It's erupting, and it should. Like, it all needs to come out, and I've really, really like enjoyed the process of, I felt really uncomfortable and I felt really bad. And it's like, okay, well, what can I do about this? I can start empowering myself with knowledge that I didn't have before. So I've been watching tons of documentaries and reading lots of books and watching, the posts and the experiences and the commentary from the Black community to try to like understand like what's my unique part in being able to help facilitate this towards a more positive outcome. And I think, like you said, like education and starting to have a dialogue, starting to have a conversation, and kind of pulling yourself outside of, this reality that we exist in. And, a comparative example, I think, like in the UK, there's still a really big problem with the class system, and I was able to come over and not have that have an impact on me whatsoever because I was American. So it was like, you're just kind of other. So I didn't, I wasn't necessarily aware of it, nor was I subjected to it, but it's still a very big underlying problem there as well. So, but like knowing the system, learning how things work, learning how history got us here gives us a bit of an indication on like, okay, well, these are obviously all the things wrong, and here's how we can start to move forward. So I'm feeling a lot more positive. At first it was like a lot of shame, and it's like, I can't believe stuff like this still happens to my friends, to people I love, to people I don't know. Like, did I contribute to this? And so just being active. And, earlier in our conversation, we were talking about like, these passive choices versus active ones. So you can be active in this dialogue to have a conversation, to educate yourself, and to be like, okay, I'm committing to being a part of this so I can help change it.
Absolutely. And change is not always like, not all of us are here to save the world, and save every problem in the world. But ultimately the change comes within yourself. And even if you have a small group of, we're all influencers, right? We're in the age of influencers. So if you think about as you as an individual and the micro influence that you can have, that goes a long way. And sometimes that's where movements happen. It's so that first of all, it comes with yourself, then it comes with your own community. Then you can start going, right, how big can this go in really kind of affecting change and being part of the bigger movement? And ultimately, communities in itself, the concept of that has become this byword. Communities, you just tick off a box, but actually communities is like actual individuals coming together, connecting, understanding, sharing, mobilizing, planning, strategizing, and then you can have an impact on change. The communities have been broken down across the board, mainly Western worlds. If you look at, you talk about London is huge, and you've got so many communities, but they're all disparate. They're all over the place. And if you don't know how to connect with them, you're on the outside, right? And so social media plays a role in that, but ultimately you need real kind of community base, not just online. You do need that FaceTime to kind of real time and connect with kind of what's happening in your own area, in your own backyard. And then you can if you can make change in your own backyard and your local community, you can definitely make change beyond. So I feel like, connecting to communities in a more meaningful way, the educating, sharing, healing, healing's a large part of that as well. There's just a lot of trauma, a lot of trauma across the world, in all communities, in all generations. And talking about spirituality and the awakening, the development, first and foremost, we have to go through the process of understanding our own trauma in our own lineage, understanding that, healing that, and then you can connect with other communities, and you can really, it's powerful. It's we're not there yet, but this is an interesting time for us because there's been a shift. I can feel it. You can see it. So yeah.
Yeah. Giamira says, totally agree. First step is protesting. Second step is education. The protesting is helping to bring awareness to this issue. And then education is a way that we can, start to make a plan. And actually, Giamira and I were talking a couple weeks ago about, this idea that, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of like trauma, but how can we start moving towards this being aspirational? And, like it's an aspirational positive thing to actually like, okay, all of this stuff is terrible. How do we move past it? Like, let's be positive and like make a positive change and make it an aspirational thing to get involved and have this dialogue. And, before a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if I've had so many conversations with my white friends as well about race, and I watched Chelsea Handler's Hello Privilege. It's Me, Chelsea, which is interesting because it came out before this recently kicked off. And she said like this privilege is a white people's problem, because she went around and interviewed a bunch of white people and she's like, do you think this is a problem? And they're like, well, no. And she's like, but how would you know? And they're all like,
exactly.
So it's I think it's great. It opens us up. I mean, obviously not great that it's happened. I mean, it's great that there's such a spotlight on it, because it's allowing me to have conversations maybe that I wouldn't have done before. I didn't feel comfortable having before. And it's a little bit awkward. And I think everybody's a little bit worried about saying the wrong thing. But I think the majority of people are like, hey, if your intention is in the right place, then there's a learning curve, there's a learning process. 100%. Like, how do we act and what do we say?
How can you enforce change if you're all misaligned in terms of what the main goal and what you're working towards? And it's I'm mindful as well, and what I've been seeing as well, as great as conversation and awareness is happening, it quite often descends into divisive arguments, which is the most unproductive. And once people start getting into that, the real cause just gets totally forgotten, and then it becomes about the argument. It becomes about who's right, who's wrong. There is no right or wrong. They're just this fact. It's like these things are happening. There are communities that are being suppressed and being vilified. Like it's not a figment of their imagination. It's happening. And actually, like you say, being someone that is white and has white friends, actually, what can you do? And it's like, well, educate yourselves and like use your voice to kind of step up and call things out. Like, if you see something and acknowledge something, it's not entering into the call out culture where you go, oh, I'm going to judge you, I'm going to call you out, because that's not productive either. It's not. It's just as bad as kind of denying or whatever. It's just like there just needs to be a healthier way of communicating, and the narrative kind of needs to shift as well, because it's very much of us, them. Yes, it's true. No, it's not true. And the narrative needs to come into a more harmonious way of communicating what actually has been and where we're at now and how we move forward. Because there's a lot of what's happened in the past, what's happening now, but like, what does the potential future look like? So, like, what are we moving towards? And we're not there yet. Like I say, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen right now, but through the education, I think we'll get to a narrative that actually feels much more aligned with what we want the future to look like.
Yeah. I've gone through a couple of situations in my life where, I took the militant stance at first, either with not drinking or going vegan. And I realized I have a lot more of an impact when I live my truth and I speak my truth, but not in a way that attacks people. And actually I get a lot more people coming to me and asking me questions like, hey, how did you give up drinking? Or like, tell me more about plant-based stuff. And I'm able to have a much more effective dialogue, even things around women's rights, rather than just like attacking men for being men. It's like, calling them out in a way that's like proactive and looking at it as an opportunity to educate people rather than like tell them that they're wrong or make them feel bad. Because I think as soon as you start bringing like negative accusatory feelings into things, like people just shut down and they don't listen. So I feel like it's the same thing with this. Like I'm so much more aware of it now, and I'm talking about it a lot more, and I feel like whether people engage with it or not, they're going to hear it. And hopefully that has an impact, and just staying in the active mindset of making sure that I call out things that I don't feel are right and continuing to educate myself. my Netflix now. It's hilarious. It the content that it thinks that I like, it's serving it up. I'm like, is my Netflix racist? Like, this is so, but it's good. I love it.
Yeah, and
So
it's really about being an ally and bringing our skill sets to support in the ways in which we feel that we can. Not all of us are going to be out in the streets protesting, but actually through the tools and the skill sets that we have, actually how can we apply it in a way that can help the movement really.
100%. So on similar lines, like obviously we have a pandemic right now, and there's a lot of like heavy stuff going on with that. So how are you handling that, and what's kind of helping you get through and stay motivated and stay inspired and happy?
It's been an interesting one. It's an interesting conversations that I guess all of us are having with friends and people that we meet. It's interesting because everyone is experiencing the effects of the pandemic, but everyone personally is having a very different response to the lockdown. I would say that I'm on the scale of I'm okay. Things have been quite positive in my kind of experience of it, in the sense where I already work from home. I'm lucky that I've got this project outside of home, which is literally just down the road, and growing vegetables and kind of building creative community setup. So I would say that in terms of how I'm coping or how I'm dealing with it, my daily routine is very much like eating healthy, making sure I have a smoothie every day, and I've got all my my little potions in there, superfoods, and doing meditation and going out and kind of taking the dog out, connecting with nature, all those really simple things that are for free. I don't take it for granted, and I just kind of I keep a check on like how much news and how much social media I absorb, because that is extremely toxic. And again, as much as I have a healthy relationship with nature, you also have to, tech is part of my life. So I have to also be conscious and have boundaries with that. So I would say a lot of my friends and people that I work with, they were overwhelmed quite a lot of the time, consuming too much of social media in the news, and feeling quite confused actually, because they think they're informing themselves, but actually too much information with no real clarity can be even more confusing. So just keeping a balance of like checking in. I'm reading news across the board, but I'm not reading it every day. Just kind of really focusing on actually more future thinking, idealists, if you will, like, listening to other podcasts where like there's some really interesting guys that talk about what does the future look like in a new system, like understanding what, blockchain, decred, what does the future look like that outside of the, the existing financial system. Like Charles Eisenstein is someone that's really interesting. He talks about the concept of the gift economy. So outside of the capitalist view, again, how we think about money, how we exist in the system. We've got loads of projects or people that connected with projects like regeneration, growing your own food, being more sustainable. Those things feed my mind. They feed my desire to trust that there is other ways for a better future. Because if you're just in the grind of reading the daily news and it's all very negative, your world becomes quite closed in that negative mindset. So it's just keeping a balance with everything. Showing myself love, loving the people around me, all those basic things.
It's so funny. Literally last night I was having a conversation with my friend, and he's like, yeah, I'm just getting really stressed out and upset with what's going on right now. And I'm watching the news all the time. And I was like, well, what else is going on? And he named off like 10 things that are just absolutely amazing in his life, like things that are taking off. And I was like, what, like, is the news like a way to, if you're not used to having like things going really well, like, is the news a way to keep yourself in that state that you're used to, where things aren't okay? And he's like, well, I just feel so bad about everything that's going on right now. And I was like, you're not Jesus. Like, like it's not your responsibility to like take on the whole world's problems. Like, you don't have to watch the news. You're not an irresponsible person if you don't make yourself feel bad, you know, with what's happening right now.
Absolutely. And you know, also need to bring into context that the news is also, you know, it's a microcosm of what's happening around the world. You're getting a very small version of a big picture. And sometimes, you know, that can be skewed as well. You know, I work with media and I work on some amazing stories, and you know what? I've been told by journalists they're not going to cover it because they're not going to get the clicks, right? So like, I know that there's incredible things happening out there in the world. You just have to search for it because you're not going to get that necessarily through like, you know, the kind of daily commercial news platforms. But it's also just, yeah, keeping connected to what's happening in your local community, what's happening in other parts of the world, and just kind of, you need to maintain hope. Otherwise, it's just a really depressing space to be in.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, the news is probably experiencing a renaissance right now because a lot of people weren't consuming it, but like, you know, advertising rates, like the amount that people are consuming news is at an all-time high. And the reason is because fear sells, you know, like bear that in mind when you're watching the news. It's like, these guys need as many people as watching as possible. These guys need as many people picking up the paper as possible. That's how they make their money, you know? So like a cool story versus like, oh, what headline can we do that makes people pick this up and like get afraid, you know? Like fear is such a strong motivator.
And I think it's why, you know, again, it's like taking responsibility of managing how much you're taking in to keep connected to kind of the reality of, you know, the world that we exist in, but also, you know, keeping connected to, you know, all the other great things that are happening that isn't necessarily, you know, documented in the commercial news. It's just, you know, just feed your mind with interesting things that are happening around the world that, you know, that kind of give you hope. It's just like what I do, man. Like, you know, give me new perspectives, you know, because it keeps your mind fresh. It keeps it active. It keeps you curious. And like the minute you become complacent, you're locked into the matrix, you know?
Yeah, man. So it's kind of a nice segue. I'm going to get there, but like, organization and productivity is something that I talk about a lot, which seems incongruent with this idea of like being unrestricted and free and spirituality and everything. But like, I wholeheartedly believe having systems and structures that like put the overwhelm and the stuff on autopilot allows you to like enter a much more creative, free space. So tell me a little bit about how you stay organized and what role organization has in your ability to look after yourself.
Yeah, I mean, organization is something I've had to learn. It doesn't come natural to me, like, but I've learned that actually spending a bit of time to kind of implement basic things in place actually helped me to allow me to be flexible within being organized. So yeah, I guess, you know, things like, you know, having a daily routine help, you know, a lot of my days in terms of my work capacity versus my personal life, obviously very different. But in my day-to-day with work, you know, my days are pretty much centered around my meetings. But within that, there's a lot of flexibility. So it's making sure I've got time for, you know, doing yoga in the morning, walking the dog, eating, making sure I've got time to connect with my agency, my colleagues, where sometimes we're just talking and we're not necessarily talking about work. We're just shooting the shit, right? And then throughout that creativity comes and we collaborate. And for me, yeah, just like being able to have time to do that, but at the same time, you know, making sure that I've got time to be free and daydream, but at the same time, if I really need to knuckle down and get things done, making sure that I set myself deadlines. You know, not huge ones, but just being realistic about actually the time that I can do things in. I think working in an office it was a very different mindset. You know, you kind of have to be in this construct of 9 to 5 kind of attitude. Whereas, you know, working from home, I know that I work in like 3 to 4 hour spurts, like intensely, where if I'm going to get something done, I'm like, right, I'm going to commit the morning to that. I'm going to commit the afternoon to that, and then leave myself, you know, a few hours to kind of decompress. So that's how I like to organize myself. And then on the flip side, if we're in the middle of a launch or kind of on a project with other team members, you know, having weekly check-ins, you know, that help me organize, be like what we got going on this week. So it's just like these little tools, and writing notes. I know it's like little things like that. I've got this thing called Wonderlist that I use.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
I don't always connect with it, but just having little lists of things that aren't necessarily priorities, but things that I definitely need to do. Minor things, you know, like admin, which is always always gets you, but like doing your expenses and paying invoices and things like that.
Those things, if they're floating around in your head and not captured somewhere, they constantly remind you at times when it's not helpful, right? So like when you're in the shower, your brain being like, hey, you need to do your expenses. You're like, well, I can't do that now. So,
exactly.
you know, there's actually reasons why you should be like capturing this stuff, because then your brain's like, okay, I know Shakira's put that in Wonderlist, so I don't need to keep reminding her of it.
Exactly.
You know, and which is a nice little plug, because I'm starting a to-do list challenge tomorrow. And it's not just to-do list, right? It's like how you plan, how you capture all that stuff that's floating around, how you like make sense of it, and then how you, like you said, set deadlines and be realistic with the amount of time that you have. So I'm going to tell everybody a little bit more about that in a minute. But the other thing that you mentioned was routines for self-care. So I think that is a great organization tool that can make sure that you like put your self-care and, you know, maintain your well-being on autopilot. So like, you know, my morning routine now kind of goes into the 2-hour range, but I just started literally with just drinking a glass of water in the morning and not looking at my phone first thing. So, you know, you can start learning habit or creating habits where you don't even think about, okay, now I need to do yoga, or now I need to meditate, or now I need to just have a like chilled out coffee. Actually, when you do it on autopilot, that's an element of organization, right? Like you're organizing this habit system to ensure that you're looking after yourself. So yeah, I love it. I love that you have your routines. And are you saying a couple years ago you were doing this like challenge where you were waking up like crazy early in the morning and doing the yoga? Are you still doing the like super early mornings, or that was like a short challenge, wasn't it?
I mean, I was doing it for about a year, but I was getting up at 6 every morning and doing yoga for like an hour and a half, but like full on. I was actually going to the classes, and do you know what? I was absolutely flying, so full of energy, but then just the dynamic of work threw me off. And so I'm no longer committed intensely in that way. But actually, I kind of started it up again because obviously with you know, do loads of Zoom yogas now. It's a lot easier to kind of roll out of bed and kind of switch on your computer and kind of get involved. So I've been doing that, but less so, just because I like doing it on my own, actually, in my own time, and like when my body feels like it's ready to do it. At 6 a.m. it's not always ready to start doing back bends and scorpions.
I love. So this is how much my mindset's changed, right? Like when you were telling me about this a couple years ago, and you're like, I wake up at 6. I'm like, that is so crazy. Like that is so early. Oh my God, you know. And then like the last 6 months, I've been waking up about that time. Like when I was living in circus residencies, and now I kind of naturally wake up, depending on what time. You know, I definitely am like an 8-hour girl like you. So whatever time I go to bed, I usually wake up exactly 8 hours later. So yeah, it's so funny, but I love doing yoga in my own time, and you know, not having that like pressure of like other people around, and you know, if you need to make noises or not be pretty when you're doing it, like you can chill. I just saw a question come through from Giamira real quick. You were talking about the positive news and taking in positive news. So do you have any tips on websites to find this positive news that isn't covered in the mainstream media?
There is actually a website called Positive News. There is. So there's actually, and you can, and so they're independent. So I think you can pay like a couple of quid a month that supports them. But they try and give a more broad view of kind of like what's happening, you know, interesting technology, good things that are happening around the world, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, so it just kind of gives you a more balanced view of like the good things that are happening and companies that are doing good things as well, and individuals. So that's just one that's off the top of my head. And then it's more about like podcasts as well, like listening to podcasts which have really interesting people on there. There's one called Emerge, which basically just has incredible, like this guy has this incredible people on there that you're just like, whoa, I'm going to need to go and do some research on this. So, and a lot of them is very much like kind of on the spirituality side, but also doing a lot of work with kind of building new systems, looking at finance, looking at ways of living, agriculture, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, Gio just said positive news. Oh my God, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I actually think I met the founder. So she was just starting up a couple years ago. So I think it's probably the same person. I'm so happy it's still going. You just reminded me I need to like go and check that out. You know, and yeah, I think podcast is something, it's clearly new to me. This is episode 7 and I just love doing it and kind of like putting different voices and inspirational people like yourself out there. So hit subscribe if you haven't already, because we got it every week. So we're nearly out of time, and my last and final question that I love asking everyone, because everybody just has, you know, such unique and different answers. But I would love for you to tell us what living unrestricted means to you.
Good question. Living unrestricted is being true to myself, being true to the words that I say, and the values that I hold myself to. So I would say, yeah, like waking up every day and being like, am I being true to the things that I want to wear, the things that I'm saying, and how I respond to things as well. Like, I feel like that's being conscious within yourself, and understanding that you have choices is quite unrestricted and empowering. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my God, Shakira, I'm so happy you joined me today. This was awesome.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom and talking about like balance. So yeah, it was so good to have you on.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking.
Awesome. So such an incredible chat. And I am going to love you and put you to one side while I just say a couple more messages about what's coming up in the final week. So thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
And also next week, I mentioned we're going to have Holly Angela Clark, who is just an incredibly dynamic woman. She is the co-founder of Earth Pulse Collective. And oh my gosh, let's see if I can read all of these things. She's a visionary, artist, dancer, traveler, ceremonial practitioner, earth medicine facilitator. She does primal therapies, a psychedelic explorer, energy healer, writer, course developer, speaker, and lover of life. And this necklace that I'm wearing was actually an incredibly powerful gift and talisman from her. She is just on another level with her energy and beauty, and she's going to be awesome to talk to. So I hope you will join us next week for another episode of Unrestricted. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend.